Welcome! Are you excited for a fun learning session? Okay, great! But before we start, make sure you have the following: self-learning module, ball pen, and your pad paper. For the class rules and objective, under class rules, we have ready your materials and mind for learning. Number 2, your 100% to every session. And number 3, build on what you learn. And for the objectives of the lesson, we have number 1, explain workplace hazard and risk. Number 2, identify hazard and risk in workplace as well as the operational health and safety procedures. And number 3, explain the effect of hazard and risk. For today's TLE lesson, we have the practice occupational health and safety procedures with yours truly, Ma'am Nika Evaristo. Before we start the lesson proper, let us have a pretest. The type of test is multiple choice. Write the letter of the correct answer on your answer sheet. For question number 1, sewing tools like scissors and shears can cause A, adverse effect, B, hazard, and letter C, risk. So the correct answer is letter B, hazard. For question number 2, exposure to agent can lead to nasal, laryngeal, and bladder cancer. A, biological, B, chemical, C, physical. The correct answer is letter B, chemical. For question number 3, it is any change in body function or the structure of cells that can lead to disease or health problem. A, adverse health effect, B, hazard, C, risk. So the correct answer is letter A, adverse health effect. For question number 4, the chance or probability that a person will be harmed or experience an adverse health effect if exposed refers A, adverse health effect, letter B, hazard, and letter C, risk. So the correct answer is letter C, risk. For the last question, we have number 5. It refers to any source of potential damage, harm, or adverse health effect on something or someone under certain condition at work. A, adverse health effect, B, hazard, and letter C, risk. So the correct answer is letter B, hazard. Did you get a nice score? Great! For the lesson proper, we have the perform basic maintenance, which safety first is an adage that we usually hear. It is better to have preventive measure before we encounter any risk or hazard in a workplace. We can avoid this hazard and risk if we follow certain precautionary measures in the workplace. OHS, or what we call Occupational Health and Safety, OSH, is about preventing people from being harmed at work by taking the right precautions and providing a satisfactory working environment. Under OHS, we have the hazard. Hazard is any source of potential damage, harm, or adverse health effect on something or someone under certain conditions at work. It can cause harm or adverse effect to individual as health effects or to organization as a property or equipment losses. Sometimes it is referred to as being the actual harm or health effect it caused rather than the hazard. Here are some examples of hazard and their effect. First example of hazard, we have the scissor. The cause of the hazard is cut. Next one, we have the hazard, which is the electricity, and the cause is the shock. Next example of hazard is wet floor, and the cause is slip. The last example of hazard is we have sewing position, and the cause is poor posture. Risk is the chance or probability that a person will be harmed or experience an adverse health effect if exposed to a hazard. Adverse health effect, if exposed to hazard, it may also apply to situation with property or equipment loss. There are different factors that influence the degree of risk include, number 1, to what extent a person's exposure to hazardous things or condition. Number 2, we have how the person is exposed, example, breathing in a vapor, skin contact, and number 3, how severe are the effects under the condition of exposure. Adverse health effect is any change in the body function or the structures of cells that can lead to disease or health problem. It includes bodily injury, disease, change in the way the body functions or develop, decrease in lifespan, and change in mental condition resulting from stress, traumatic experience. We have different types of hazard. Number 1, we have the physical hazard. Number 2, we have the chemical hazard. Number 3, we have the biological hazard. Number 4, we have the electrical hazard. Number 5, we have the ergonomic hazard. Number 6, the psychosocial hazard. And the last is we have the radiation hazard. Let us identify and differentiate the different types of hazard. First type is we have the physical hazard. These are the substances that threaten your physical safety. The exposure of a worker to dust and fibers from materials such as silk, cotton, wool, flax, hemp, sisal, and jute can occur during weaving, spinning, cutting, ginning, and packaging. Workers may be also exposed to noise and vibration. For example, during weaving, spinning, sewing, twisting, and cutting. Here are some examples of physical hazard. We have the slips, trips, and fall. Chemical hazard. Many different groups of chemical substances are used in textile sector, including dyes, solvent, optical brighteners, grease, resistance agent, flame retardants, heavy metals, pesticides, and antimicrobial agents. Here are some examples of chemical hazard. We have the paint thinner, antifreeze coolant, paint, spray net, pesticide, and many more. Biological hazard. In some activities such as carding and willowing, worker may be exposed to biological agents such as anthrax, Clostridium tetanus, the causative agent for tetanus, and Coxiella brunei, which causes Q fever. Exposure to biological agent can result in allergies, and respiratory disorders. Here are some examples of biological hazard. So we have the fungus, bacteria, virus. For example, the COVID-19 is under viruses, so it is under biological hazard. Next hazard, we have the electrical hazard. It can be defined as a dangerous condition where a worker could make electrical contact with energized equipment or a conductor, and from which the person may sustain an injury from shock, and or there is a potential for the worker to receive an arc flash burn, thermal burn, or blast injury. For the example of electrical hazard we have in the photo is the exposed wiring. The next one, we have the ergonomic hazard. Poor workplace design, awkward body mechanics or postures, repetitive movement, and other ergonomic hazards induce or contribute to a staggering number of cumulative trauma disorders. Cumulative trauma disorder, or the CTD, affects hands, wrists, elbow, arms, shoulders, the lower back, and the cervical spine area. The examples of ergonomic hazard is what we have for example, office health hazard. If you have improper posture, it may lead to hyperemia, headache, shoulders, backache, neck pain, and tunnel syndrome. The next, we have the psychosocial hazard. This type of hazard relates to mental health and behavioral disorders. One of the psychosocial issues is work-related stress that has been defined as the experience when the demands of the work environment exceed the worker's ability to cope with or control them. Work-related stress may be an issue in some areas of the textile sector, being associated, for example, with repetitive and fast-paced work, and where the worker has no influence on how the job is done. Example under psychosocial hazard is, based on this picture, the boss is being harsh to his employee. The last type of hazard is the radiation hazard. Describes the hazard of the electromagnetic radiation to fuels, electronic hardware, ordnance, and personnel. Some of the examples under radiation energy is the exposure to electromagnetic energy. Hazard management. One of the most important duties required by OHS law of all workers, including volunteers, is to keep the workplace as safe as possible. A good way to do this is to use the 4 SAFE steps. S stands for spot the hazard. A, assess the hazard. F, fix the hazard. And letter E, evaluate the result. Risk management. For major projects, risk management provides a structured way of identifying and analyzing potential risks, devising and implementing responses appropriate to their impacts. Did you learn from our discussion? If yes, very good. There are several types of hazard and risks that we may encounter in dressmaking. Make sure you must perform safety first and the operational health and safety procedure. It's activity time. So the direction will be draw a smile before the sentence if the statement is true, and draw sad face if otherwise. Write your answer on your pad paper or your answer sheet. For question number 1, one of the important duties of OHS is to keep the workplace as safe as possible. So the correct answer is smile. For question number 2, hazards and risks in textile sector possess risks for workers, and some of these are particularly dangerous for women's health. So the correct answer is smile. Question number 3. Work-related stress is not a psychosocial issue in some areas of the textile sector. So the correct answer is sod. For question number 4, accidents like slips and the risk of fire and explosion may be encountered in garment or textile sector as a physical hazard. So the correct answer is smile. For question number 5, one of the operational safety precautions while sewing is not to push or pull the fabric while sewing and let the machine work. So the correct answer is smile. Question number 6. You have to turn the power off when making adjustment to the sewing machine, such as changing the presser foot or the needle. So the correct answer is smile. For question number 7, you need to check all adjustment and setting of the sewing machine carefully before you start any sewing operation. So the correct answer is smile. For question number 8, risk can cause harm or adverse effect on humans. So the correct answer is sod. For question number 9, hazard refers to the chance or probability that a person will be harmed or experience an adverse health effect if exposed. So the correct answer is sod. So for last question, number 10, teachers' permission must be secured before you operate the sewing. So the correct answer is smile. Did you get a high score? Very good. So it seems that you already understand our lesson. For the summary of the lesson, lesson recap 1, which is the hazard. It is any source of potential damage, harm, or adverse health effect on something or someone under certain condition at work. For lesson recap 2, which is the risk, is the chances or probability that a person will be harmed or experience an adverse health effect if exposed to a hazard. For lesson recap 3, which is the adverse health effect, is any chance in body function or the structures of cells that can lead to disease or health problems. For your assignment, imagine you visited a garment factory or dress shop. Try to visualize and list down 5 operational health and safety procedures that they apply in their dress shop or factory for hazard and risk management. Thank you for attending our class today. If you have questions, inquiries, and suggestions, you can message me directly on our group chat. See you next week!